Dr. Davies, what are the key challenges facing the new Defence Minister and the incoming government?
Well, the challenges fit into three main categories really. There's the very broad challenge of matching resources and strategy. There's a number of quite particular management issues within the Department of Defence, both within the headquarters itself and beyond that, including the DMO. And then there are the questions of managing major defence procurement projects like the Joint Strike Fighter and the Future Submarine.
And the most critical?
Well, I think the most critical problem is coming up with a sensible strategy. We've just had an election campaign where the catchphrase on both sides became returning defence to 2% of GDP in terms of spending. But there's actually no strategic basis for that 2% number. It's a bit arbitrary. In order to work out what you spend on defence, you need to know what it is that you're trying to do. Basically, spending money on defence is something you do to retire strategic risk. So you identify the risks, work out what you need to do to either hedge against it or to have the military power in place to deal with it if it manifests itself. But you need to match that strategy with the resources that you're putting in. And the right answer might be 2% of GDP, it might be more or it might be less, but until you've got your strategy worked out, you're not really in a position to come up with a spending number.
Of the challenges you've just mentioned, is there one that sticks out as being particularly difficult for the new government?
Well, I think the point about the defence challenges we've identified is that they're all complex. Defence is a very complicated Department of State, and it's one where it has decisions being made on every timescale from decades from now through to tactical decisions being made in terms of hours and minutes as to, do we send a patrol boat here, do we send an aircraft there? So it's a mind-bogglingly complex business. We're sending people literally all over the world. They're doing a range of things from warfighting through diplomacy, constabulary tasks, and also trying to develop strategy and develop a sensible defence capability plan, for example. It's very complex and it's not something that anyone's going to get on top of in weeks or even a few months. It's going to be a year or two before the government has a clear idea what it might like to do with defence.
Moving to hardware now, what are the challenges in the acquisition program?
Well, the biggest games in town are the Joint Strike Fighter and the Future Submarine. The Joint Strike Fighter is perhaps the easier of the two because firstly all the research and development effort is taking place somewhere else. But that doesn't mean that the decisions are easy because we've already seen a number of quite tough decisions be made by both sides of government in the last 10 years when it became obvious that the Joint Strike Fighter wasn't going to be delivered to its original schedule. Now, a lot of those issues have been resolved, but not all of them. And we still don't know exactly when Australia's purchase of the Joint Strike Fighter will happen. And we don't know what the RAAF's fleet's going to look like, particularly in the second half of the 2020s. So there's some decisions to be made there about what the future air combat capability looks like. But the most difficult project to manage is going to be the Future Submarine. Much of the work is going to be done here in Australia, including a lot of research and development. And as a result, it means that we're going to carry most of the risk in terms of cost, schedule, and the capability of the eventual submarine that emerges at the end. Now, we've bought a little bit of time by deciding that the Collins fleet is going to be extended by probably 8 to 10 years, which means that the Collins boats will be operating late into the 2020s. But as funny as it sounds to say it here in 2013, we could still run out of time. The Future Submarine is not even at the concept design stage at the moment, and the current timetable has that happening in about 2015. So if a decision is made then for a detailed design, that could take an extra few years, and it could be 2019, 2020 before we seriously start building the replacement boats. So if you're looking at the first one arriving sometime in the mid-2020s, we're going to be running pretty tightly. The Collins will be starting to reach the end of its life at the time that the new fleet's appearing, if everything goes well now. And the incoming government's job is to make sure that the decisions that need to be made now and in the next few years actually happen.